Do a mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brasher.
I'm your host, Katie Burke.
I'm your host, Dr. Jerad Henson.
And I'm your host, Matt Harrison.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm going to be your host, Dr. Jerad Henson today. I'm joined in studio by co-host, Dr. Mike Brasher.
How you doing, Jerad? Good to be here.
I'm great. Still really enjoying the new studio here.
Absolutely.
Happy
We've done
to
a
see
few
it.
things in here by now, so it's worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it's great. We have joining us from the web world over here, Adam DeHaan, who is a senior director of development for Minnesota and Iowa. Adam, thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure to join the podcast. I love the studio, guys.
Thanks again. And we also have our special guest today, Pete Stoddart from Cargill. Pete is the Director of Corporate Responsibility. Pete, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to meet you, and really eager to talk about this great story today.
Well, awesome. Well, kind of the story we're talking about is one of a cool landscape, a little different funding opportunities that we've explored, and some unique partnerships that have really brought about kind of a cool new way for us to do conservation work in North America. And so I do want to back up just a little bit, and the audience knows a lot about us. They've heard our story.
Yep, too much.
But
too many times.
Adam, do you mind doing a little background on yourself, how you ended up at DU, how long you've been with DU, and what led you here, et cetera? So
We're going to give this the very quick version. I was a college basketball coach for 12 years, but my biology undergrad degree I thought something was missing. So I started checking out online some opportunities that were available. Ended up at a Ducks Unlimited event, checked out the regional director, had coffee with him. Next thing I knew, I was moving to eastern Nebraska and Omaha to work as a regional director in our fundraising side of the business. And then ended up in Memphis for 3 years as the manager of volunteer services, and then moved up to the Twin Cities to work with our major sponsors and develop opportunities. And Living Lakes here in Minnesota is very, very prominent. However, we're prairie people by heart, a lot of prairie support, and then more recently, as opportunities like the Ogallala Aquifer have come available and opportunities and program is ramped up, there's a lot of energy for the Ogallala, especially through foundation and corporate entities like Cargill.
yeah, awesome. And you're a waterfowl hunter, right? I've heard some stories.
There's a lot of stories, and most of them are true. I shoot waterfowl from Canada down into the southern Playas every fall, and Pete's had the good fortune or bad fortune of coming with me. However, I will let him tell those stories.
You know, the stories that are true are never as exciting as the stories that aren't true. Those are the ones that I'm really interested in. Unfortunately, I don't know that we're going to be able to get to those today.
No,
maybe,
but they're always really exciting.
Maybe another time.
Yeah. And Pete, can you talk a little about what you do at Cargill and kind of how you got into the corporate sustainability world and a little bit of that?
Yep. All the stories about me are true, so I want to put that out there right now. So I've been at Cargill for 15 years. I started here in the communications and the public relations area, and I was supporting the work, doing communications work for the very cool work that the company was doing and giving back to its large nonprofit partners and its local communities, and had been doing PR for a good part of my career, and really got a taste of this part of the company, which is such an important part of the history of the company and telling the stories of it. I approached the person leading the team at the time and said, "Hey, would you ever want a communications person to come over and work on the giving side of things?" So I've been doing this for the past 5 years. I lead our partnership with Ducks Unlimited, and I also work in our other areas of corporate giving, mainly in the food security space. So I lead our partnership with Feeding America, for example, and so sustainability, food security are very much a part of the focus of what we're doing with our corporate giving and our business giving. And so been doing it for 5 years. Very, very fulfilling work, very educational, a great mental challenge, but also just a lot of emotional payback when you get to work with great partners such as DU and so many of our other partners out there.
Yeah, and we're really glad to have folks like you as partners that share that passion for giving back, for protecting the resource, et cetera. Can you give a quick update just kind of on what Cargill does? Cargill does a lot. And just kind of a nutshell kind of example or reference on that.
Partly they feed the world, as I understand
They
it.
do. But there's, yeah.
So where I sit in the company in the western suburbs of Minneapolis, this is the global headquarters for the company. And then we have another big beachhead in Wichita, Kansas, where our protein business is headquartered. And then we have locations scattered around the world, 74 plus countries, where we're doing handling of grain and other crops and turning it into food and fuel and bioindustrials and working closely with the agriculture community. We have a very strong legacy trading business where we're trading on commodity markets around the world. I've had the great pleasure of working here in the U.S., but also traveling to see our businesses in countries like Argentina and Brazil and Europe, work closely with my colleagues in APAC region and EMEA on the things that they're doing. So there's people doing what I do in all parts of the world. And so we're interconnected. We all work under the same mission. We don't have a Ducks Unlimited Asia branch yet, but we're definitely working on water programs in those parts of the world equally as we're working on them here in North America. The company has a great history. It's 150 plus years and counting. And I was here when we celebrated our 150th anniversary, which was a great celebration. And it's a fantastic company, fantastic values. The values of the family that part of the company is very much lived out every day, and we work closely on making sure that a key part of our work, in addition to what we do from a business standpoint, is about our giving back to organizations like this and on a smaller level in our local communities. So it's a real privilege to actually have a job like I have in a company like this, because it is not just an add-on. It's very much a core of who we are and how we operate.
Well, that's awesome to hear. It's always the great feedback you want to hear and the stories you want to hear about partners and those that you're working with. And that's kind of one of the reasons we brought this topic up today. We've got a wonderful relationship with Cargill, and we're working in some really cool places, and some places that sometimes can be a little challenging to find funding for. And one of the places that Cargill and DU are working together is in the Playa Lakes. So that's the kind of pothole-like wetlands underneath or above the Ogallala Aquifer in Southern Plains?
The Southern Great Plains
areas. Mike can.
Yeah, do we want to go there right now, or is that where we're going to go to the geography? Or I actually have a question for Adam.
Oh, ask. Yeah.
So I want Adam's. So we have a number of corporate partners such as Cargill in different parts of the country. They are They've been with us for varying lengths of time, and they've come to partner with us and see the value of what we do for a variety of reasons. And so, Adam, I want your perspective as a development guy who works in this space to kind of speak about how does some of that. How does for an audience that we have here that may not think, when they think about Ducks Unlimited, they may not think about the people that we have working in this corporate partner space. We will talk a little bit later on about why the work that we do with our corporate partners is just as important and of the same type of activities that we do with any state, federal, or other kind of partner. But for people that may not be aware of how we work with and how we come to work with corporate partners around our conservation work, give us some insight to that, Adam, because this is what you do.
Yeah.
Yes. What is driving corporate engagement with Ducks Unlimited is something every duck hunter knows. Every person who uses the outdoors and consumes Mother Nature's resources knows that biodiversity leads to long-term integrity. And our work we've always talked about duck calories and duck use days and waterfowl pairs and brood nest success and all of these real ducky metrics, fall flight numbers. And we know that as duck hunters, when all the factors are right, we're going to have lots of ducks. We know they need clean water. We know they need a lot of different plant communities in the wetlands, and they need uplands to nest in. And that is now becoming a value in the corporate world. They understand that biodiversity leads to long-term integrity, and that our singular focus of wetlands sufficient to fill the skies with waterfowl today and tomorrow, that vision statement, also has many other stacked benefits. First and foremost, clean water, reducing flooding, so on and so forth, nutrient reduction for our municipal water supplies, water quantity for underneath the Ogallala. There's towns in Kansas that are experiencing dry wells. So it's our work, and we're getting better at talking about all of the different benefits that our singular purpose of habitat for waterfowl has a lot of value, not only to corporations, but to communities and people as well.
Yeah. So, Adam, we've talked on a number of previous episodes with folks like Dr. Steve Adair, our chief scientist. We've had some other partners. ConocoPhillips is an example. We've been working with them for over a decade, maybe 2 decades now, and a number of other people too that we've had these conversations with. Trust in Food, Trust in Beef. Mm-hmm. That's the one that I was thinking about here most recently, talking about these benefits that go beyond just waterfowl. And then a lot of times I find myself in conversations about, well, why are we working with these different groups? Why are we not just focusing on the traditional work? And ultimately, it comes down to, from our perspective, it's like the threats to waterfowl habitats and all the benefits that they provide have never been greater. I mean, we have to work with as many partners in as many ways as we possibly can that will contribute to our overall mission and vision as an organization. And there are, as you talked about very well, those other benefits that we've been delivering through our conservation work are now of increased attention and value to a whole other swaths of society. And so we are finding ourselves in more conversations with people that are recognizing what we do. And because we are trying to grow and scale our conservation,
we've invested in this space as well. I mean, my entire team, I'm on the ES and sustainability team. I'm a project manager is my normal job outside the podcast studio. But the team I work with Dr. Ellen Herbert. She's our senior scientist for nature-based solutions and sustainability. And it's her job and our team's job to try and figure out what those benefits look like, right? That we can market to everybody else, right? Because our work has tons of benefits, as Adam mentioned. But we have to be good about talking about those benefits, right? Beyond just ducks.
Right. we build natural infrastructure that provides nature-based solutions for all of society. Let's keep talking about it. Let's keep spreading the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Cargill is, I'll be honest, I was not aware of the depth and breadth of our partnership with Cargill. We're going to get into that here in a minute, but we're going to talk about Southern Great Plains and the work in the Playas, but it stretches
a little bit with
well
that.
beyond that.
Yeah, well, I think we can start a little bit with that history, and that's a good place to jump into. We kind of just re-upped a grant agreement with Cargill, and that's kind of what led to this podcast. Is a significant chunk of that money is going to Ogallala support, specifically in the Kansas, Nebraska, a little bit of Colorado, I believe is what Pete mentioned earlier. That's the focus area for that. But I was talking to Tana earlier today, who's in our foundation relationships as well. She said she found records going back working with Cargill in 1994.
That's right.
So
Cargill cares. Pete's in charge of that as well.
So that's a long-term partnership and a great partnership, and it keeps going, and we keep working together. And so, yeah, we've worked a lot, from what I understand, at local facilities. Is that correct? Over the years, but the past 5 years since Pete's come on with it, we've really gotten much more. And Adam and you two have really built this into a much more national level focus and a much larger landscape level fundraising. I
mean, I think how Adam described it is, if you go back to, I didn't have the 1994 date, but I'll trust DU on that. Your records are probably really strong on that. But in the early days, in the mid 90s, early 2000s, a lot of this work was happening by groups inside our facilities. We call them Cargill Cares Councils. There's now 400 of these around the world. These are groups of a team within a plant. When they're not doing their critical work as a day job at the plant, they're working with the budget that's been allocated to them to make decisions about how to give back locally. And since the mid 90s and increasingly up to the scale of the partnership that we have today, the core of this work started at a local level. I haven't met any of them, but I suspect they were passionate duck hunters. Maybe a few of them owned some land. They were trying to do some early conservation work. And you take it to where we are today, and this is, around the world, and for sure in the United States and Canada, our most significant water partnership. And it is significant because we call on Adam and so many others across the DU team to step up on not only finding good projects, which is the very first order of business, but then managing those projects, tracking the progress of the work that's happening. And they are extensions of us in the field. We are great at what we do at Cargill, but we are not great at what DU is great at, but we trust them with a very, very, very high level of confidence to go out and advance this work, talk over the fence, back a tractor to farmers. And so the dynamics of this were just awesome at the very beginning, just very local, hyper local work up to this, not just U.S., but U.S. and Canada. It's a North America partnership with lots of sophisticated, very cool elements of it, and it keeps us very busy in a very good way.
I was reading through kind of our press release on this, and Adam, can you talk a little bit, since we've talked about it a few times, this new agreement with Cargill North America and kind of what we have going on? I know that you mentioned there were 4 different landscapes, and this being one of them that we're going to talk about a little bit today. But Adam, can you mention a little bit on that?
Starting in Canada, we are working 2 different partnerships directly with farmers on rangeland management, and then also marginal lands, mixed ag producers, and using their land smart and sequestering some carbon and improving water quality. And then moving down into the upper Mississippi, Cargill is working through the IDOLS program there to restore drain prairie pothole basins. And the state of Iowa calls it tile intercept program to slow water down to reduce nutrient loading and flooding. We call it duck habitat. We're creating some wonderful wetlands in Iowa with Cargill's help, and then the bulk of the work then is I forgot about the New York Finger Lakes area. That's been a long-standing Cargill Cares area of interest, and we've continued that in this agreement, working on moist soil units and marsh restorations in New York. And then lastly, the Ogallala Aquifer, whether it's timed recharge back into the Plat River through some very ducky pond building there, or whether it's working with landowners in Kansas to clean the sediment out of their aquifers so that the surface water can interact properly and recharge the aquifer across Kansas. It's profound. Cargill was very particular in what they were looking for, and we were able to deliver 4 different landscapes that are important to their customers and to the company as well.
Yeah, and all 4 of those landscapes and all of those projects, because there's a lot of different habitat work being done under that guise, but the overall arching goal is water quality and water quantity, correct?
Correct. But Cargill, go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a goal, sort of it's a global goal, and DU is obviously a big part of that, where it's a 2030 goal. So I remember we came up with 2030. We thought that's going to be a really long time away, but it's coming up quick. And so we're trying to enable the restoration of 600 billion liters of water and the reduction of 5,000 metric tons of water pollutants in water-stressed regions around the world. So, and those are some big, strong numbers. And we obviously have a global footprint. Much of that footprint is here in North America. So when we put a target and a goal like that out there, and we look at places like the Ogallala and other areas that we select, Adam's exactly right. We went through many weeks of ideation and brainstorming and debate and maybe a couple of disagreements and a lot of clarifications, because this is a very nice size grant, but it's not all the money in the world. No one has all the money in the world to do these things, so we wanted to be really selective, really precise, and this area was an excellent place to start because we could make such positive gains in an area. From what Adam and I have talked about, is that there was work happening there, but not work at the scale that it's happening now. And so this was a trailblazer opportunity. It was really waiting for this very good fit for the types of goals that I just outlined we could accomplish there. And so it's and so far, not just so far so good, so far really good. And the first, we're just about a year plus into the work, and we have about 18 months of progress yet to make, but we're off to a really fast start.
That's
Pete,
awesome.
Pete, you mentioned that it was a great place for you all to start. Makes sense for you all to start. It also makes sense for us to partner with y'all in this area, because that southern High Plains area is a high priority.
It is
for waterfowl habitat conservation. It's a really unique geography, and there's a number of partners that work there. But it's kind of been interesting to see the evolution of wetland conservation in that landscape in particular, because it's so sparsely populated with people. And what we will certainly have already talked about, no doubt, is the importance of water, and specifically water through that aquifer in that landscape. Right. And so the Playa Lakes Joint Venture is one of the regional partnerships that kind of covers that area. And it's been interesting to see the evolution of the way they have approached wetland restoration, wetland conservation in that landscape. They were able to deliver a little bit through traditional partners on the backs of waterfowl in the interest of other wetland birds. But then once they began to talk about the benefits of wetlands as aquifer recharge, it opened up that entirely new kind of conversation with municipalities, with corporations. And although the work that they do now is the same as the work they used to do, it is their audience is in terms of who they're trying to get support from is very different, and some of their messaging is different as well. They don't gain traction in some of those landscapes, at least for additional resources for wetland conservation, by talking about ducks, kind of what you led with, Adam. So as a duck scientist, I'm always going to think about ducks and geese and other wetland birds. But what that allows me to do is also see how the things that waterfowl habitat provides enables us to have these other conversations and accelerate our work in these important geographies such as Southern High Plains.
Right. And that's like the coolest story about this is the fact that it was a hard area to find funding for through that traditional waterfowl message. Just because most of the people that live there, I mean, it's really important for Central Flyway folks at stopover sites, for ducks all up and down that flyway. But those local residents, most of them don't hunt. Most of them didn't care about waterfowl. They cared more about farming, and that some of that traditional idea of farm through a wetland and things like that kind of carried through. But now that we've been able to quantify the benefits that those playas now have, that slowed that. Now people in the community start to think about those things very differently and say, oh, that's not just a mud hole.
Yeah.
That's helpful. That puts water in my, in my fields for ag irrigation. It puts drinking water in the system, et cetera. And so those are really important things.
I think I mentioned
that part of the country for us is it's a vital operational area. If you start in Dodge City, which is where we have a beef processing plant, and you drive west, you're going to go to Fort Morgan, Colorado. So this area sits almost exactly between two of our largest beef processing facilities. So that has a non-scientific reason to sort of, but these really this area is in our operating backyard, and that's important. And because a lot of our employees, our carers councils, our stakeholders in our communities, they are often the ones that are either enjoying this from a recreational standpoint or care about it from a sustainability standpoint. So the location has tons of reasons from a scientific standpoint, but from Cargill, this area is very much an extension of our operating communities.
Yeah, and we have a map, actually. For those of you who are listening to the audio only, if you watch us on YouTube, you can see some visual effects here, and we do have a map we'll try and throw up.
I think I mentioned a moment ago, I think I referred to it as the Southern High Plains. That was only capturing the southern portion of that. I think it's like the Southern and Central Great Plains would be a better descriptor of this larger area that we're talking about. You can go ahead and put that back up there, Chris. Well, you going to explain what we're looking at there?
Yeah. So we're just talking about the Playa Lakes location and the overlap of the southern parts, central to southern part of the Ogallala Aquifer. This runs from western Nebraska all the way down into the Texas Panhandle.
That gray area that you see on your map there, that is the outline of the Ogallala Aquifer.
It is.
The red outline there is the boundary of the Playa Lakes joint venture, and all the other little blue dots that you see in there. If I'm not mistaken, it says courtesy of the PLJV. Those are areas, those are known Playa wetlands in that Playa Lakes joint venture landscape. There are playas, I think, that are outside of that, but you don't see those mapped outside that red boundary there. So because I think those the origin of those blue dots there was from the Playa Lakes joint venture, if I'm looking at it correctly. I don't see any blue dots in Nebraska outside the PLJV boundary, and I think that's just an artifact of who produced this. So
that's right. The Rainwater Basin joint venture would take care of that Nebraska blue dots, right?
And that's another important landscape to talk about. It's the Plat River, the Rainwater Basin in here that's not included in this conversation that we're kind of getting into, but those are also very important landscapes as well.
And Cargill has done some support in the Plat, as Adam can speak to as well, prior to this partnership. So this is a focus now, but the Plat was very much in focus in our previous grant cycle.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Adam, do you have anything you want to add or talk about there? Or do you recall that off the top of your hat?
Oh, for sure, because I was the regional director in Nebraska when Jason Christensen was at the Cargill facility in Blair, Nebraska, and began supporting the rainwater basins work and the Plat River work. In the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s. So it's been the tone and tenor was set locally and from Blair to Fort Morgan in this landscape, and is and in Wichita for that matter. They've been a longtime supporter as well. So it's just fun to watch it grow from 3 little locations to a comprehensive North American partnership.
Yeah. And this landscape is very important for waterfowl. Mike, can you hit on some of those benefits?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk
more
about that a little bit. It's the Playa Lakes joint venture region. This central southern Great Plains region is pretty remarkable. I won't go into a great deal of detail, but the sort of the dominant wetland feature of that landscape is something known as a Playa wetland. These very shallow, isolated, sort of geographically isolated. They're not hydrologically isolated from the aquifer or anything, but they're shallow wetland basins, depressional wetlands that are I think the sort of scientific community generally agrees that they originated through the combination of wind and rain and some subsurface carbonate dissolution. Anyway, the origin of these things has been debated for a number of years, which is interesting in itself. But that's the dominant. Just think of a shallow seasonal wetland. A lot of them are much shallower than prairie pothole wetlands that we think about. Prairie pothole wetlands can be 4, 5, sometimes 5 feet deep, maybe even deeper in some of them. But playa wetlands are generally less than 3 feet deep, is my understanding. They derive their water from just these small watersheds within which they occur. There's not a lot of stream flow that goes into these playa wetlands. And there are other larger sort of saline lakes and other wetland complexes throughout that larger landscape. But generally, what we're going to be talking about are the playa wetlands. As we mentioned a couple of times, they're a primary source of recharge for the Ogallala aquifer. They have been, subject to a variety of filling and draining and other types of activities that have sort of reduced their value to waterfowl and other wetland critters throughout the decades. This landscape, when you look at those that are important for migration, for migrating and wintering waterfowl, there are some ducks that will breed there occasionally. But the one thing that is characteristic about this landscape is how dynamic it is. Whenever you look at, take for example, Texas, the southern high plains, the very southern portion of this geography falls in Texas, and they conduct their annual midwinter waterfowl surveys during early January, and you can look at those numbers. In some years, depending on how much rainfall has fallen in the preceding months and how many wetlands are available, you can have waterfowl abundance estimates like of 25,000 or 1.2 million. That kind of variation is not uncommon. It's because this landscape in some years can be very wet. In other years, it can be very, very dry. And so that's probably the most unique thing about this landscape is that average doesn't mean anything to this landscape. It's a
tale of two extremes.
That's right.
Yeah.
But it can support, when conditions are right, it can support over 1 million ducks and even more geese than that.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of hunters in that area relative to the number of waterfowl that you might find, although I think in some ways the secret is starting to get out in some locations, especially for sandhill cranes.
I was going to say sandhill cranes and cacklers come to mind when I see that map. Those are some waterfowl that I know people will target in that region.
Yeah, so it's really important geography for migrating and wintering waterfowl, and the value differs greatly from one year to the next, but it is nevertheless a landscape that we and others invest in for supporting continental waterfowl populations.
Yeah. Speaking of waterfowling, I heard somebody may have talked someone else into going on a long walk through some of these wetlands.
That's a story. Are we gonna hear it?
Pete, you got to
Yeah.
tell them about when I walked you out into the bottoms.
So I'm just in full disclosure here. I've come to this ducky world late career, a little bit late in life, and with great gratitude to Adam for easing me into this. My first sort of real duck hunting trip was with Adam to this area, and we decided to go for a hunt at dusk, and it was warm. It was as hot as it gets in Kansas in September, and maybe 10 degrees warmer than that. And pulled off the side of the road and got everything ready. And he pointed to this area that I couldn't see, but he assured me that we were able to go out that far. And I followed him through the mud and the grass, and we got set up, and I was awestruck, to be honest with you, by the beauty. And I'm born and raised in Minnesota. We don't have much topography like that, but just the colors and the sky, and Adam did help me shoot a few teal that day, which was super exciting. And but I went there wanting to sort of experience this great area to see and also to hunt. But it was being there, I was half thinking about hunting and half thinking about, what this area was like, and having never seen it before, and just seeing the vastness of it was just truly awesome. I made it back. I made it out, and I made it back safely, and I'd love to go back again. We went the next couple days. We did a little bit more hunting. We did a lot more touring. Went to one of our facilities, and I just it's quite frankly something I'll never forget. Just I drew a lot of inspiration from seeing the progress that DU is making there. Also, just seeing some of the challenges of some of this inconsistency that you were speaking about, in terms of a little bit dry in some areas, really wet in other areas, and as we all know, there's no better way to see this and to work in this space without going out and and getting your feet wet, literally and figuratively. And so that's what we did. And it's a from a work standpoint, and for working on this project, it was such an excellent introduction to this space. And then and I just gained a ton of appreciation for those experienced duck hunters out there, for what they'll go through for a little bird with a blue or green mark on their wing. And but I don't know. I think I sent a picture to Adam and this morning of one of those, and my smile was pretty big. And I don't know if it was just because I was totally out of breath, or I was sweating so much from walking through there. But I'd go back in a heartbeat again. I just really, really fell in love with the area.
Now, did I understand from that you've been able to get out and do some teal hunting already this year, or
that last year?
We're working on that. We're working
Okay.
on that. And we went one other time, not as with as much success as we had those few days in Kansas, but we have some other secret trips planned this year, and here in Minnesota. Locations, of course, we won't disclose.
no,
but
absolutely not. Yeah.
but really, so I'm learning, right? I'm not a ducky, but I'm starting to learn the game here a little bit, right?
Your fishing background is paying dividends here in your new duck
That's
hunting
right,
hobby.
Yeah. I mean, the other cool part about this, and we did a tour with a big group from Cargill in Iowa this spring. Took about 20 people, left from our headquarters, spent the day going down to Iowa, and we drove down a stretch of I-35 left from Minneapolis, and I've probably driven that 250 times in my lifetime, and I'd never really looked off the interstate much to appreciate what was there. And there were about 5 or 6 projects from basically the southern suburbs of the Twin Cities all the way down into central Iowa that that some Cargill had been part of, many that Ducks Unlimited had been part of or was part of right now. And just like Kansas, my eyes were open to just see things and notice things that without a good partner and a good organization doing them, it was just just another appreciation for it. Haven't stopped to hunt any of those, but sure do enjoy just the beauty and the progress and the sustainability that's happening there.
Yeah, that's an awesome story, and I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear how you've come to appreciate what it is that I don't know that we know and have grown up doing. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I've said this before in various places. I can't imagine my life without having a very visceral connection with the outdoors and wetlands in particular.
Right.
And Pete, it's so cool to hear you experiencing that and telling those stories, even though you didn't grow up with it. And there's a really important message there. You don't have to be a 9 or 10 or 17-year-old kid, boy or girl, in order to, at that time, to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Get into it in adulthood. And it's some phenomenal experiences. And we love sharing and love hearing.
Yes. And that scenario you painted right there is one that resonates with me every time. Watching the world wake up from a wetland.
Then and you never know what you're going to see.
Yeah.
So many stories that we have of things we've seen and we've experienced is that you will not get if you're still in bed at 6:30 in the morning.
Right. Or staying in town.
That's right. That's right. Can I go back and kind of edit myself? We knew we were gonna have to do some of this editing on the fly whenever we went to video. We don't have as much editing capability. I just want to clarify. Whenever I was talking about the duck abundances there in that region, saying in some years it can support upwards of 1 million or more. That was just that southern high plains portion of Texas. So when you look across this broader geography, we're talking multiple millions of birds. And so just wanted to kind of clarify that. I've edited myself twice now. That's okay. We're going to do that.
I think that's really important to note. And that landscape's really important for ducks when it has water.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times it has water when some of the other areas don't, like El Nino versus La Nina cycles, things like that. And I think that's important to note, and that's why it's important to protect those wetlands.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's times when those are needed, especially for like pintail populations and things like that depend heavily on those. So I think that was it. Is there any conservation activities specifically that we use, Adam or Mike, that y'all might want to talk about to target playas?
Yeah, we do have some of those, but I wanted to hear from either Pete or Adam things that y'all wanted to talk about with regard to the type of the way we're partnering with Cargill. I want to on some of the Playa conservation work. So I want to first defer to y'all and the things that y'all are particularly excited about it. Who's got some input there?
If I could preempt that a little bit, because I don't want to miss the opportunity to thank. Part of the joy of these 2 field trips that we took was meeting your teams in the field. So in Iowa, it was Mike Shannon who toured us for the day. Just an incredible, passionate guy. Just did an awesome job with our group that day. And then Matt Ho and Abe Lawler in Kansas, and phenomenal people. And when you're a corporate partner and you go into the field, I like to see the teams doing the work and the teams and because you feel closer to the work. And without question, these 3, and I know there are a lot of names behind them that are supporting them, but they were such drivers of the significance of this work, and they spoke in terms that our groups could understand and explain it in a way that we got excited about. And so thank you, Mike. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Abe. Thanked Adam enough, but those and they're the ones that are out there doing it. And there's so many. I know that is just 3 of hundreds that are doing this work around the country, but what a gift it is to have them as part of our team. And so I didn't want to miss the opportunity to call out those 3 that I met. We did have Dr. Waldrop came here to Cargill last year, spoke to a group, met with some of our leaders. That was terrific. Scott Stevens, as I think we're supposed to call him, Dr. Scott Stevens, is
Let's not get carried away.
Got to meet him last year on a work / fun trip. Incredible guy, and just as he was moving from Canada to South Dakota, so this is to me is the story behind the story of these partnerships, is that it doesn't work without names like that behind it. And we push hard. I mean, this is a big investment for us, and we have high expectations. But when we see that and we connect with those sorts of teams, and we see their sincerity, their determination, it really validates why we're doing this work, and we're doing it with DU.
Yeah, Adam, do you have anything to add there?
One thing that Cargill always wants front and center when we're reporting and when we're visiting is how many farmers are we interacting with? Are we impacting? Are we educating? Are we giving opportunities to? And this program in the Ogallala really dives right into that. Abe Lawler is driving down every gravel road in Kansas and knocking on every door and looking for playas that could use our help and use our conservation measures, and that can bring value to that landowner in his farming operation. And it's just such a perfect opportunity for Cargill to interact through Ducks Unlimited directly with farmers and landowners. That if we can keep replicating that across the country, we're going to be winning, and our economy is going to be winning, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a landscape that is predominantly privately owned, like many others that we work in, that are so important for waterfowl. We mentioned this before. A lot of the areas that are so important for waterfowl are also the ones that are so important for agriculture or other types of land uses that are mostly privately in private ownership.
And we've got to find ways to work together, win-win solutions in those habitats. Yeah. And that's what I think we've done here, and it's been fantastic to be a part of that and showcase that.
Yep. Jerad, what I can do just to kind of help people with a mental image of what some of our conservation activities even look like in this landscape, I have just a few things. I reached out to Ellie Nugent, who is one of our biologists in that landscape, and she kind of gave me a few bullets to talk about. And so when you think about Playa Wetlands, these shallow basins, many of them through the years have been farmed. Like historically, they would have been seasonally wet or dry, whatever the case would have been. They're dominated by annual grasses and sedges and other kind of herbaceous plants. But when those are farmed, there is a tendency for the sediment to slowly run off, and in some cases, it runs off, of course, into that basin, and over time, it can reduce the water holding capacity of those basins. And from a wildlife standpoint, waterfowl standpoint, you eventually lose water holding capability. If you don't have water, we know it's not going to be of great value for waterfowl. The other thing that can happen is that it reduces that aquifer recharge benefit.
Porosity of the soil, it kind of plugs it up.
So one of the actions that we and others implement is actually removing, if we're doing some playa restoration, we will remove that accumulated sediment to reestablish some of that topography, allow it to hold water, and allow it to provide opportunities for it to infiltrate into the aquifer. The other thing that we do in some cases is filling ditches that have been created to drain playa wetlands in some situations. So if that playa restoration can consist of just filling a drainage ditch. Another thing that's kind of interesting there in that landscape is something that referred to as I don't know. Essentially, they dig pits in the center portion of playas. They did this a number of years ago as a pretty common practice to provide a deeper water storage area in a smaller portion of that playa basin. You're therefore slowing the evaporative potential of that of that particular area, and they did that because they wanted to use that water for irrigation purposes. Now things have changed. That practice of digging pits is not as common anymore because there are more efficient irrigation practices now. Again, it's heavily agricultural, ag-dominated landscape, important for producing food, fiber, fuel. All those things are really important. And so now one of the restoration activities is we'll go in and we'll refill those pits, no longer needed for irrigation. And so then when you fill that pit, it allows that water, same volume of water in theory, to kind of spread out over a larger portion of that basin. There are a few other things, establishing buffer strips, restoring grasslands in some cases around the playas. And then there are a number of other things. And so Pete and Adam, I don't know how many of those activities are actually sort of fall under the portfolio of our partnership with y'all, but I know some of them do. But I just wanted to provide a little color to what physically we do to restore playas and make them more productive for waterfowl, wildlife, other wetland wildlife, as well as the aquifer recharge and other benefits that come along with it.
I was about to say, those things you just talked about, and one of the important things is we've been talking about water benefits. But Adam mentioned at the very beginning, biodiversity. Ducks, waterfowl, that's biodiversity. But with those buffer strips, with those playas, you get native vegetation, you get pollinators, you get other things that can also help the ag community, that can help the wildlife in that area. So lots of benefits. We're going to miss a few that we're not going to mention, but
we'll ask for forgiveness from our regional staff,
but
because we know that they're the ones that are best equipped to talk about
there. Yeah. Is there anything y'all would like to add to any of that, or Adam, is there anything that you're aware of that Mike left out?
No, I mean, he went right down Ellie's bullet points, and
okay.
When Ellie's working in Nebraska, they're filling those borrow pits and they're restoring rainwater basins in that manner. When Abe is working, he's more focused on removing some sediment and restoring the hydrology so that Playa can interact with the aquifer. And both of them are restoring the upland buffers and creating some upland habitat around them to also help with aquifer recharge and biodiversity. And it's all of the above. And Cargill's right there, lending their shoulder to the wheel with our great habitat work.
Yeah, and Pete mentioned it earlier. He mentioned, talking about how impressive it was to see the DU staff on the ground doing their work, and but we can't do the work without the funding.
Right.
Without great partners like Cargill that are looking to the future and looking to waterfowl and looking to wetland habitat and those types of things. And
what is one of the famous sayings? I've heard a number of people say it, including our CEO. Conservation without funding is just conversation. I mean, it's true.
That's exactly right.
It is absolutely true.
So yeah, that's a big point I wanted to make after listening to Pete say that. So I guess our next question, and kind of one of the last things to talk about, is what's this look like in the future? We hope to continue this partnership and see where it goes from here.
So did Adam ask you to ask that question?
We gotta put that jab in when we can, right?
Now I've got to take him to North Dakota hunting or something.
Right.
So they're doing my job for me.
Conservation is a long game, Pete. We're never finished. The threats are persistent.
I've heard all the lines. Trust me, I've heard all the lines. Yeah. I've heard all the lines. No, I would say it's going to be. We're hoping for more of the same. And when you also look at the factor of the multiplier factor that DU brings to the table, when our $1 can convert into 2 up to 3, maybe some cases 4 additional dollars through the local and federal programs that you have access to, and we love being the Kickstarter for that, and that's obviously a great value add to working with an organization like DU. So we agree this is a long game situation. This is not a quick fix and all of a sudden make a grant and come back a month later and everything is all fantastic. We've been around for 150 plus years. We know that this is complex. We know it is important. And so I would say we're going to be leaning on them even more. It might be more of the same. It'll likely be some additional things. In this particular partnership, we're about, I would say, a little bit over a third of the way through the agreement, and so we have about 18 months or so, give or take, ahead to continue with this work. Super encouraged by the fast start, and particularly in this area, like I said earlier, where this was work was not super a big magnet for funders in the past, and it was we feel fortunate that DU helped us find it, and so obviously there's tons of opportunity there. And then you take it, we haven't talked a lot about the work in Canada, but we're doing some things up there as well. We have a partnership that's a few years older than this, with some prairie grass work that we're doing through a program that our Protein North America business called Beef Up Sustainability, and that's focused on grazing land and sustaining those. So it's the dynamics of the relationship with ducks just gets to be more and more. It started as a few careless councils, and now there's parts of ducks that I'm not even working on inside of Cargill. So the diversity of the teams that you have access to, and vice versa. I mean, we have relationships with your great folks in Canada and all these different regions around the U.S. So we have high reliance on all of them, and I think we will continue to do that going forward.
Yeah.
How was that, Adam? Did that make Adam happy?
Brought a tear to my eye. Thank you.
Well, Adam, do you have anything you'd like to close with or mention before we kind of wrap this up?
I just want to applaud you guys for getting sustainability out onto the airwaves and onto the internet, and man, keep doing these shows, and someone out there is listening, and maybe one of my colleagues will get a phone call later this week and we'll start up a new partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always looking for that.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. Please let me know. I'm always looking for content.
Yeah.
Good stories. This one's going to be a hard story to beat in that landscape. It checked all the boxes and really was a fun story to talk about. So as we kind of wrap this up, I will definitely have to thank our special guest, Pete Stoddart from Cargill North America, Adam DeHaan, DOD,
Director of Development,
from Minnesota and Iowa, my co-host, Mike Brasher.
Great to be here, Jerad. Thanks for all you're doing to help us bring these messages to this platform.
Yeah, thank you. And we always have to mention the man behind the curtain over here, our producer, Chris Isaacs, for all the work he does wrangling us and putting these shows out there for the audience. And we definitely have to thank the audience. Thank y'all for listening in or viewing this time.
Yeah.
And I hope to catch y'all on the next one. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Also proudly sponsored by Bird Dog Whiskey and Cocktails. Whether you're winding down with your best friend or celebrating with your favorite crew, Bird Dog brings award-winning flavor to every moment. Enjoy responsibly. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU Podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.